Hey guys, Drake of Advantage Archery, Twin Falls, Idaho here. I'm going to walk you through the basics on how to build an arrow. Talk about a couple different jigs, a couple options on how you can get that done. So first we'll talk about two types of jigs we like to use. Most of our arrows are built on a Bitzenberg style jig. We really like that because it gives us the ability to 4 fletch in multiple different degrees, 3 fletch, adjust the helical rate, straight offset. Several different ways we can build an arrow so we can really custom set the arrow the way we want it. Another one that's really popular for guys that do it at home, and if for somebody who just wants to do them quick, the Arizona Easy Fletch. This is a really cool fletching jig. You can put 3 vanes in, do all 3 at once. Really consistent helical on them, really consistent vane placement, so it takes a lot of the common errors that a lot of people make fletching their own arrows. So while we're talking about that, we'll talk about those common errors. So when you're using a Bitzenberg or any style of clamp jig like this, it is very important to get the vanes seated at the same position every time. Otherwise you end up with a staggered set. So if you end up with a vane that's a little staggered off, it's not the end of the world. The arrow's still gonna shoot fairly well, but cosmetically wise, it doesn't look as good. So second thing, that a common mistake with this, a lot of people put too much clamp pressure down and they'll actually push the vane off the shaft while they're trying to glue it down. So a little bit of finesse, you can get this figured out really quick. So here at the shop, me personally, I like arrow wraps on my arrows. So every arrow I shoot, I put a wrap installed on it. Those that don't know what that is, it's basically a vinyl sticker we're gonna roll on the back end of the arrow shaft. Gives us more visibility so we can track the arrow in flight, find it in the ground better. I like to use white and pinks on my arrows. Pink I can see really well. White I can see if I hit an animal, what kind of blood residue I have, stuff like that. Second reason we like arrow wraps, it personalizes my arrow. You get in a group of guys shooting at a 3D course at the Total Archery Challenge or something like that, it's hard to tell everybody's arrows if somebody's got the same fletchings. So we'll start by installing the wrap. One thing that is really critical, and most people make a common mistake when building an arrow, they don't clean their arrows very well. So it's really critical. We like to use 91% isopropyl alcohol. We want to clean everything that we're going to be trying to adhere to. So the back end of the shaft, I'm going to put a little bit on the nice clean paper towel. We're going to just rub that down. Once you've cleaned the arrow, it's real critical. Don't touch it with your hands. Your hands have oils, dirt on them, any of that. That'll contaminate that shaft again. I don't even like to have the shaft touch anything else after I've cleaned it. So I'm going to clean them off really well. Next step is going to be actually installing the arrow wrap. So there's arrow wrap pads out there that you can help roll a wrap with and stuff like that. A mouse pad works really well if you're at home. Just any kind of hard surface. If it's got a little softness to it, it allows you to put a little more pressure on the shaft and get it to stick better. So same thing, we don't want to touch that wrap surface a whole lot. We're going to lay it down onto the sheet there. Okay, so we're going to line up the back end of the shaft, knock into the shaft. I'm OCD, so I always like to start with the axis label. Now we're fletching east and axis straight up at me. Come into position, get it squared up, eyeballing it. Light pressure. I'm going to take my finger and run that crease real quick, make sure that wraps down. Continue that roll all the way around. So we've got our wrap installed now. I'm going to run my finger over that seam, make sure everything's down good and tight, no bubbles in it. Back to the cleaning. Okay, so our first arrow I'm going to fletch it on the Bitzenberg. I got this jig set for 90-degree 4 fletch. I've been 4 fletching my arrows for a long time. Some real pros to that is it allows me to index my nock 4 separate areas, so I get plenty of spine indexing. So if I get a broadhead not shooting quite the same as the other ones, I can actually nock tune that arrow to bring them all in and shoot them together. Got your nock receiver down here. We're going to start with the same point. I always like to have the flat end towards me. Your nock does have a little point on it. That's your indexing on the nock. I always like to just keep it simple and keep everything the same. One thing that I like to do when I have arrow wraps on is I want to make sure that I have a vane that cross sections over that seam so it helps glue that seam down. If you get a vane that sits on the side of the seam, putting it in and out of your bow case, arrow hits another arrow, and when you're shooting, that seam's a weak point, and if that can peel that wrap and make a wrap failure, then you got to refletch. So hold your nock receiver, and then you can just turn your nock and kind of eyeball that to where you can see that we have our seam sitting right where our first vane is going to lay. So now that we got our seam in position for our first arrow, we're going to be loading our vane into it. So like I talked earlier in the video, there's a certain point we want to set that vane. I mark all ours with a Sharpie, that way it's consistent, we can come to it. And you set your vane into the clamp, slide her down into position, lining up the base or the bottom of the vane to that mark. I want to put a little pressure so that that clamp is holding on to that vane. Like we said earlier, cleaning everything is crucial to getting vanes to stick really good. Back to using our alcohol, Q-tip. I'm going to clean the base of that vane, just wiping it off. One thing that a lot of guys make a mistake, they get in a hurry trying to get their arrows fletch faster. You got to let that alcohol dissipate off before you put any glue on it, otherwise it won't make contact. So while we wait for that to happen, we'll talk about the types of glues out there. There's a whole bunch of different fletching glues out in the market. At the shop, we like to use bonding platinum. I really like it if I'm using a wrap. Platinum seems to be a more pliable, it glues to wraps really well. Another one we use a lot of is AE Max Bond. So this is a very fast curing glue where platinum has a little longer clamp time. Because I got a vane on, a wrap on this, I'm gonna use the platinum to glue this vane on. So it's nice and dried off. Gonna start by tail end, get a little dab of glue, and then we're gonna run a nice thin bead all the way down the base of the vane, right in the groove. So clamping onto it, we talked about a common mistake. A lot of people don't come all the way down. This is a magnet here, so it'll hold that. So I want to come down, put the base of the clamp against the jig, and then from the bottom forward, I'm going to roll real slow and up. You can see I got a little bit of glue that come out the side. Q-tip, and you just wipe that right off. So with platinum, we usually do 3 to 5 minute clamp time with a plastic vane. If you're doing feathers, we like to run like 15-minute clamp times with feathers. Feathers really want to curl off the shaft if they don't get contacted down real good. So once our clamp time's up, loosen up your clamp, lift it straight up, grab your knock receiver, roll it in X position. So the bits has detent clicks to it. So when you feel that click and hear it, you're in the next position. Continue on with building your arrow. Okay, so there we have it, 4 fletched, ready to go. One thing I like to do on my arrows, and we do it here at the shop on all the arrows we build, I like to take that same glue we fletched that down with. We want to come in on the tip of the vanes, front and back, and put just a dab of glue there. That helps close that seam down, so if you get a pass through on a target, something like that, there's less chance of that vane getting caught and tore off. So it gives you a little more longevity. Glue control is critical on this too, just a little bit. You just want to put a little bit. So I like to do that front, and then I do it on the back of the arrow, on the back of the vane too. So there's our arrow fletched up on a Bitzenberg. Okay, now we're gonna show you how to fletch on the Easy Fletch. So this is an Arizona Easy Fletch. This is the Mini Max. Gives you a lot of right helical. So 3 fletching option on this one. The light blue color, that's gonna be your odd colored vane. Your other 2 are your common vanes. So same thing, we really wanna clean everything here. I already got my arrow shaft pre-cleaned on this one. We're gonna load the vanes in on this, real similar to the bits. Push them all the way down into that positive position at the back end of the clamp. Gonna walk in. This clamp doesn't hold quite as good as the bits, so you gotta be light when you're cleaning them. Just night light. Just good even strokes on it. Get that vane cleaned off. Once that alcohol is all dried up and dissipated, we're gonna put glue on all 3 of these at the same time, before we use it. Same thing, light glue down the center of that base. So this has a knock receiver down inside of it, just like the Bitzenberg does. We're gonna set it down into position, just like that. Same thing, I wanna find that seam and make sure I got a vane that lays on that wrap seam, which I got lucky and it's right there on that one. This is a spring-loaded jig, so we're just gonna push up, give it a quarter roll, and as we come forward, you see the clamps come down. Pull down on it, make sure it's secure. You wanna go over the top of the shaft. Has a locking collar to lock it into position. A lot of guys like using this at home because it speeds the process up. Instead of putting 1 vane on at a time, now we're into 3 vanes at a time. So we can build arrows a little bit quicker at home when you got 1 jig. So give your clamp time when you're ready. Pull that collar off. Push that back up, quarter roll. Now you can just take your clamps off, there you have it. So one thing that's really nice about the Easy Fletch, especially Mini Max, you can see it puts a lot of helical on the back end. So for those guys looking to really get control over a fixed blade broadhead, that is a great way to do it. Getting a lot more helical, getting a lot more aggressive on that backside. Got it on there, back to coming in on the ends, and just dab a little glue to seal that seam. If you're one of them guys that a little extra glue bugs you, grab that Q-tip and just go in and wipe that off. There you have it, arrow fletched up on the Easy. So there you go, guys. That's how we fletch arrows here at the Advantage Archery Pro Shop. If you got any questions, need any advice on what's going on, if you got something like that, give us a call at the shop. We're more than happy to help you out on that.